When Lewis Grant opened the freezer door that morning, he expected frost and cardboard, not the frozen secret that would expose the UK's most advanced drug empire. Early in the spring, long before anyone suspected wrongdoing, a series of refrigerated lorries traveled across the UK following routes so ordinary that no one ever looked twice at them. They passed through busy motorways, quiet back roads, industrial estates, and supermarket loading bays with the same steady rhythm each week. Their sides carried the Frostline Logistics logo, a simple image of a snowflake wrapped around a delivery van, the kind of logo people notice without ever remembering. The trucks never arrived late, never took unexpected detours, and never created trouble. They blended into the background like any other part of the country's supply chain. Inside the trailers, everything appeared perfectly normal at first glance. Boxes of frozen chips, vegetables, pizzas, bags of ice, ready meals and every other typical supermarket item were stacked neatly and labeled with dates, batch numbers and storage instructions. Nothing looked unusual, and workers handling the shipments were used to tight rules about temperature and timing. Frostline was known for being strict, claiming that even brief contact with warm air could ruin fragile products. Most staff found the rules annoying but harmless. If the company wanted to be overly careful, that was its business. Yet small details began to raise suspicion, long before anyone understood what they pointed to. In 3 different cities, supermarket employees noticed unexpected power flickers in the refrigerated trailers at the very moment they arrived. The lights inside blinked out for a second or two, the cooling units paused, and then everything resumed as if nothing had happened. Drivers always blamed the jolts from reversing into bays or unstable power connections, and the excuses seemed reasonable. But the strange events kept happening, and only with Frostline deliveries. Another pattern silently repeated itself. Whenever a shipment arrived, the accompanying paperwork insisted that staff were not allowed to open the pallets until Frostline's own team arrived to verify product integrity. Most companies sent drivers or warehouse supervisors with each load, but Frostline sent plain uniformed workers with a logo patch and no names, rotating them often so no one could remember faces. They quietly checked pallets, reset straps, and left without speaking much to anyone. Their presence never seemed threatening, only peculiar. The cold cargo continued its nationwide circuit, as if following an invisible map. Trucks went from regional depots to supermarkets, from supermarkets back to regional hubs, and then onward to freezer storage sites in rural areas no one thought twice about. Every delivery matched the corresponding order numbers, every barcode scanned correctly, every freezer pallet carried the right temperature readings. Nothing failed inspections. Nothing looked tampered with. For months, the entire operation rolled on without catching the attention of any authority. Still, something about the deliveries felt disciplined. The trucks always traveled in pairs during certain hours. Whenever one trailer malfunctioned, another Frostline truck arrived minutes later, as though someone had predicted the failure. Even supermarket managers joked that Frostline logistics were smoother than the weather forecasts they relied on. People trusted the company because it made life easier, not harder. Then came the freezer malfunction that changed everything. At a supermarket in the Midlands, one pallet arrived with frost forming on the outside plastic, as though the temperature inside had dropped far lower than required. The store technician, trying to protect the food stock, opened the pallet only far enough to locate the source of the fault. He expected to find damaged packaging, broken coolant lines or a blocked air vent. Instead, he noticed something odd. The frozen goods were arranged with unnatural precision, like layers in a puzzle rather than a random stack of supermarket items. The technician did not dig further, but the sight unsettled him enough to report it. What began as a simple equipment issue would soon expose the first crack in a conspiracy that had traveled the country unnoticed, chilling its secrets beneath layers of frost. The technician's report triggered a quiet inspection by local authorities, who approached the situation expecting nothing more than a packaging error or a safety violation. They took the suspicious pallet to a controlled facility and thawed it slowly to avoid damaging any evidence. At first, only the expected items appeared: Boxes of frozen vegetables, packets of pre-cut chips, and containers of mixed produce. Everything looked routine until investigators peeled away the second layer. Beneath it, they found a row of frost-covered bricks wrapped in industrial plastic, their shapes too perfectly uniform to be ordinary food products. Each brick was heavy and cold enough to numb the fingers of the inspectors handling them. Laboratory tests revealed the shocking truth. Inside the frozen bricks was a synthetic drug unlike anything previously recovered by UK crime units. Its formula suggested precision engineering, with a purity level so high that even a small amount would have enormous street value. What puzzled analysts most was the way the substance had been mixed with chemicals that became harmless when frozen, but dangerous when warm. Whoever engineered the product understood both chemistry and cold chain logistics to an alarming degree. The discovery forced the authorities to classify the case as a high-level threat rather than a routine smuggling attempt. As days passed, more attention fell on Frostline Logistics. Investigators began inspecting the company's distribution records, trying to trace where the counterfeit pallets originated. Yet every document was perfectly organized. Every delivery log matched the route trackers, every invoice aligned with the expected quantities. No depot reported missing stock, no employee had filed complaints, and no transport manager had noticed inconsistencies. The operation had been planned with a level of detail that suggested long-term preparation. If the drugs were moving through Frostline trucks, they were doing so under the cover of an extremely disciplined system. To avoid alerting whoever was behind the scheme, authorities conducted covert checks at Frostline's regional hubs. They observed staff movements, watched how pallets were loaded, and monitored the incoming and outgoing trailers. For weeks, nothing changed. The trucks arrived at consistent times, the workers followed the same routines. The shipments looked identical. There were no unusual slips, no suspicious behaviors, and no unexplained corrections in paperwork. The entire chain operated with the precision of a machine, leaving investigators frustrated and unsettled. Meanwhile, chemical analysts tried to understand the synthetic drug's origin. The substance showed traces of compounds rarely used in illegal production due to their cost and complexity. Some of those compounds were normally found in industries related to refrigeration, pharmaceuticals, or specialized manufacturing. This hinted that the conspirators possibly had access to professional facilities rather than makeshift labs. Such access would require funding, connections, and technological resources far beyond those of typical smuggling groups. Pressure increased when 3 more pallets with similar frost patterns were intercepted. Though each pallet contained the same hidden bricks, the surrounding products were from different food brands and different parts of the country. That meant the contamination did not come from a single depot or supplier. Instead, the placement of the drug bricks appeared to occur at multiple points along the transport network. This deepened the mystery, suggesting a distributed operation rather than one central hub. While surveillance continued, intelligence officers analyzed the temperature logs from the refrigerated trailers. Every truck was monitored by automated sensors that recorded internal temperatures throughout each journey. The data revealed a strange pattern. Short bursts of extreme cold occurred during specific stretches of every route. These bursts were too brief to damage most foods, but strong enough to maintain whatever was hidden beneath. The bursts also aligned with the moments when power flickers had been reported by supermarket staff. This hinted that the temperature changes were intentional, part of a controlled system designed to stabilize the concealed substance. Even with mounting evidence, investigators still lacked a clear lead. No employees showed signs of involvement, and no directors could be found to question. Frostline Logistics, operated like a company without a human face, held together by automated systems, rotating staff, and layers of administrative distance. The more the authorities uncovered, the more questions appeared. The frozen bricks were clearly just one part of a much larger scheme, one that was operating silently beneath the surface of the UK's everyday food supply chain. What had started as a single faulty pallet now pointed toward a sophisticated conspiracy hidden inside ordinary deliveries, protected not by secrecy alone, but by the constant cold that shielded every clue from the untrained eye. Investigators began focusing on Frostline's company structure, hoping to find a person, a decision-maker, anyone who might explain how such a highly organized network could exist without drawing attention. Instead, they met only silence and confusion. Frostline had changed ownership 3 times in 2 years, but each listed owner was either a dissolved corporation, a shell company registered abroad, or an individual who could not be traced. Every attempt to contact directors ended in disconnected phone numbers, vacant offices or postal addresses, linked to unrelated buildings. It was as if the company had been built from layers of smoke, designed to disappear the moment anyone looked too closely. As authorities pushed deeper, they realized Frostline's distribution network was even more puzzling. The company operated dozens of warehouses and depots across the UK, and yet almost none of them had permanent supervisors. Everything ran through automated gates, electronic logs, and rotating shifts of workers hired through agencies. Each employee worked only certain hours of certain weeks, preventing anyone from understanding the whole operation. Drivers rarely met the same person twice. Warehouse staff were given narrow tasks without explanations. Frostline had created a workforce where no single individual held enough information to recognize anything unusual. During surveillance, investigators mapped the company's routes and saw a pattern emerge. The trucks moved along paths that formed a perfect loop across the country, linking port cities with industrial estates and rural storage centers. The consistency was striking. There were never unexpected route deviations, no sudden cancellations, no unexplained delays. It felt less like a business and more like a perfectly choreographed system. Even more intriguing, the data showed that every route came within a few miles of small, extensive operation could exist without anyone recognizing its true purpose. Yet the network did exist, threading silently through the UK's food supply chain like an unseen web. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became that the conspiracy was not just about smuggling drugs. It was about engineering a system so flawlessly integrated into ordinary life that it could hide in plain sight, unnoticed by everyone except those unfortunate enough to stumble onto a single faulty pallet that revealed the first splinter in an otherwise perfect facade. Authorities planned the largest coordinated operation yet, aiming to intercept Frostline vehicles across the country in one simultaneous effort. Weeks of preparation went into organizing roadside units, undercover teams, and rapid response officers. Surveillance analysts selected the exact hour when multiple trucks would be spread across motorways, industrial areas, and supermarket loading zones. The plan relied on catching the operation off guard, seizing enough pallets to expose the full scale of the hidden compartments. Everything seemed certain, until the raids began and confusion swept through the investigative teams almost immediately. Every truck they stopped appeared entirely legitimate. Pallets were stacked with standard frozen food, seals were intact, and temperature logs matched expected values. The hidden compartments detected earlier were missing, replaced by normal insulation and standard equipment. Whatever system had existed inside those containers had been dismantled with astonishing speed. It was as if someone had anticipated every detail of the operation and erased the evidence hours before officers arrived. The discovery caused frustration and disbelief. Without the bricks or compartment mechanisms, the investigation suddenly had nothing physical to prove the conspiracy's scale. The failure raised a disturbing possibility. Someone with access to sensitive information had warned Frostline. The investigators examined internal communication channels, looking for leaks. Nothing obvious emerged. Surveillance footage of ports, depots, and office buildings showed no unusual activity or last-minute changes. Yet Frostline had clearly acted on privileged knowledge. The only logical conclusion was that the leak came from somewhere within the investigation itself, from someone who understood both the timing and the purpose of the raids. Amid this chaos, a new lead surfaced from an unlikely source. An insurance auditor reviewing claims from cold storage companies noticed repeated compensation requests from Frostline for minor refrigeration repairs at a remote warehouse in Northumberland. The warehouse had never appeared on Frostline's official list of properties, The claims referenced issues that should have required in-person inspections, yet none of the auditors had ever visited the site. This anomaly, buried among pages of technical documentation, caught the auditor's attention and was forwarded to authorities almost as an afterthought. Investigators traveled to the remote location without announcing their visit. From the outside, the warehouse looked abandoned. A simple metal structure surrounded by overgrown grass, with a sagging fence and a rusting gate. But once inside, they encountered a vast underground level, accessible only through a hidden freight lift. The lower floor stretched into a network of corridors filled with industrial freezers, conveyor belts and machinery designed to modify packaging. Each freezer had compartments matching the dimensions of the drug bricks found earlier. It was a fully operational modification center, disguised under the appearance of an unused storage building. Documents scattered across desks revealed coded schedules, chemical inventory lists and maps showing distribution routes. One section of the facility housed equipment capable of sealing drugs within ice blocks before embedding those blocks deep inside food pallets. Another area held cooling tunnels used to manipulate packaging adhesives, allowing tampered goods to look untouched once refrozen. The sheer scale made it clear that this was not just one of many sites, it was the central hub where everything began. Despite the major breakthrough, the mastermind behind the operation was nowhere to be found. Records indicated that someone had left the warehouse only hours before investigators arrived, shutting down computers and clearing certain documents. The absence of personal items suggested the person rarely stayed there long, arriving only when necessary to oversee adjustments or erase traces. The discovery forced investigators to reassess everything. The failed raids were no longer seen as a setback, but as confirmation of how deeply controlled the operation had been. The mastermind had anticipated pressure and dismantled parts of the network to protect the core facility. Yet even this highly sophisticated hub did not reveal an identity. The Northumberland discovery proved the conspiracy was larger, smarter, and more adaptable than anyone imagined. What authorities found was only the visible layer of a multi-level system. The person running it had designed every step to survive exposure, retreat when needed, and reappear elsewhere with the same precision. The only certainty left was that the mastermind was still active, and somewhere, another cold storage unit was waiting for its next shipment. Investigators shifted their attention to data that had been overlooked in earlier stages of the case. Among thousands of digital files, one forensic accountant noticed an odd rhythm in Frostline's electricity usage. A small structure on the coast, labeled only as backup storage, consumed almost no power except for one sharp spike every month at the same hour. The spike was brief but intense, unlike anything expected from a building that supposedly housed spare refrigeration units. This anomaly was subtle, hidden among dozens of similar logs, yet it stood out enough to justify a closer look. Officers traveled to the site with minimal notice, determined not to repeat the mistakes of earlier operations. The building sat alone on a rocky stretch of coastline, partly concealed by overgrown bushes and battered fencing. It resembled a forgotten utility shed more than anything connected to a nationwide logistics company. The front lock showed scratches, as though someone had frequently changed the mechanism. Once inside, investigators found rows of industrial freezers lined against the walls, each humming with low, steady vibrations. The air was so cold that frost clung to every metal surface, forming thick layers that glittered under the dim light. In the corner of the facility stood several workstations, each connected to high-capacity hard drives and specialized equipment. Some machines were designed to rapidly cool digital storage devices to the point where they became brittle, a method used to destroy data without leaving recoverable fragments. The spike in electricity made sense now. It coincided with these data-purging cycles. Whoever operated the site was erasing digital trails on a monthly schedule, ensuring no long-term records survived. It was a chilling realization. Someone had engineered an entire building around the concept of freezing evidence out of existence. As investigators moved deeper into the structure, they discovered signs that someone had been present recently. A half-packed crate sat near the back wall, filled with laptops, paper files, and chemical samples. Cooling chambers were still running, indicating they had been used shortly before entry. On one workstation, a series of open digital blueprints displayed modified container designs, temperature-triggered locks, and distribution routes. Each blueprint showed updates made within the past 24 hours. These details painted a clear picture. The individual behind Frostline's operation had been preparing to leave, likely alerted by the uncovering of the Northumberland facility. Officers searched the upper level of the shed and found a narrow door leading to a concealed loft space. There they located the mastermind, Frostline's original founder, attempting to destroy the last set of hard drives using a portable freezing chamber. The equipment had been configured to plunge the drives into extreme cold, shattering the internal components. But the process took time, and the sudden arrival of investigators interrupted the final step. The founder offered no resistance, instead standing still as though the end of the operation had been anticipated long before the officers arrived. A thorough search revealed stacks of encrypted notebooks, coded financial summaries, and maps linking Frostline's network to foreign chemical suppliers and coastal shipping routes. The operation was not a small, isolated scheme, but part of a larger international system, built on exploiting refrigerated transport networks. The founder had used the UK as a testing ground, proving that frozen supply chains could conceal contraband more efficiently than traditional methods. Each step had been engineered with precision, from hiding synthetic drugs inside layers of frozen goods, to creating containers that responded to temperature cues rather than physical keys. The collapse of the network happened quickly, once the founder was in custody. Hidden compartments were uncovered in depots across the country, and the scattered cold storage units were identified through power usage comparisons. Millions of pounds worth of illegal substances were seized, along with machinery used to create chemically stable drug blocks, designed for long-term freezing. What stunned the public most was how ordinary the entire operation had appeared on the surface. Frostline had delivered to supermarkets, ports, and storage facilities for years without raising suspicion, proving that a conspiracy could embed itself inside everyday life if it was engineered with enough discipline. As the final pieces of the conspiracy were revealed, investigators realized how close the operation had come to evolving beyond their reach. If not for the faulty pallet months earlier, the hidden compartments might never have been discovered. The cold had not only preserved the drugs, it had cloaked the entire conspiracy under layers of frost, turning freezers into perfect hiding places and temperature logs into coded signals. What appeared to be routine logistics had concealed one of the most sophisticated criminal networks in modern UK history, all built around the one element everyone took for granted, the coal.